What is going on, everyone? And after what it feels like really long, probably not as long as in between, my Resident Evil video and my previous review, which was probably already the GTA 10 months ago at this point. But yeah, we're finally coming back with another review, and this channel feels like it's starting to veer more into the visual novel genre than into video games per se. I mean, uh, well, if you don't like visual novel, you're kind of screwed for the foreseeable future, since I have like 3 more visual novel reviews coming, all from the same series, by the way. But yeah, this is gonna be the first video I make on this series, and it's gonna be about the first entry of the Ace Attorney series, Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney. I'm gonna be making a review of the first game, and while it's the first game, it's not exactly the first game, since the version I actually played was the remake that was released in 2014 with the Phoenix Wright trilogy, where it basically has all of the first 3 games remastered or remade. I mean, more like remastered. I mean, it was remastered in some areas, not remastered in others, like the sprites. But yeah, overall, kind of like a remaster, so it's not exactly the original game. But yeah, nonetheless, the story is more or less the same. The only real difference that I've heard from people complaining about were the sprite quality, but we'll handle that in the final review of the trilogy whenever I get to it. I will leave it the remake. This review over here is going to be fully focused on just the story of the first game. I'm not really going to be taking into account any gameplay mechanics or anything of the sort, analyzing how good of a remaster or remake it is, analyzing gameplay choices, and detailing any sort of specific design or gameplay design choices. I'm not going to be covering any of that in here. This is going to be purely a story focused analysis. For that review, that is going to be more global about everything, I'm going to be making that on the analysis of the trilogy as a whole. So yeah, for those who don't know, the Ace Attorney series is kind of like an half visual novel, half gameplay style. Although the gameplay is very limited style of game, where you're basically going around following several cases, and you, as the main character, in this case, your name is Phoenix Wright, as the name suggests. You are a defense attorney, and you have to defend your clients. Most of them are basically wrongfully accused in some sort of grand conspiracy. They're usually the ones selected to take the fall, and the main character needs to go ahead and, against all odds, save them, because they usually have a bunch of evidence stacked up against them. So, I mean, we also serve not just as an attorney, but also seemingly as an investigator, because we can just get into crime scenes and investigate to our heart's content. We even find multiple pieces of evidence that the cops don't even ever get to find. So yeah, I mean, we're both a detective and a defense attorney at the same time. The detective work is actually a very important aspect of the game, especially in the first one. Detective sections are actually pretty long. So yeah, the game is basically divided into 2 phases. You have the beginning, where you basically get presented with the case and the general details. Then you have immediately an investigation sequence. And then after the investigation sequence, you usually go to court. The case is very strong against you, so usually your objective during the first day is not really to get to the bottom of the truth. It's usually just to survive the first day, where all the evidence is stacked against you, and just throw a little bit of a shade of doubt into the prosecution's case against your client, so that the judge then extends the time to the following day, and then during the following day is usually when revelations happen. In the first game in particular, it's usually even longer. So you only really start getting to the bottom of the truth by the third day. There's usually 3 cycles, which, by the way, I think is not exactly great. I think like a lot of the trials here, a lot, not really a lot, but 1 or 2 trials here, not even 1 or 2, just 1 trial, really. There's only really 1 trial where that's a problem, because this game actually doesn't really have a lot of filler trials, unlike the following 2 games, which have a lot of filler trials. But yeah, there's definitely 1 trial where it feels like we're just investigating stuff, and not only does it feel like we're not really progressing and going anywhere, it feels like the mysteries we're uncovering are not really all that climactic. I mean, they feel very mundane. They could have absolutely shrunk the investigation sections into just 2 days instead of 3 in a particular case here, because the pace gets completely killed in there. But yeah, we can start just with the investigation sections, which are usually the places where the story doesn't really happen. Overall, the investigations in this game in particular, I definitely have a complaint that they usually take too long. They are too long in this game. However, for this game's credit, there is only really 1 investigation where it feels like it's definitely affecting the pace, which would be in episode 3. All the other episodes, I feel like are fine in terms of pace. I don't really see an issue with them. Even the final episode, that is very long. The final episode really feels like the length of 2 full episodes. But I feel like the length is fine because the story actually demands a length that big. You're actually uncovering a massive conspiracy in the 5th episode. Whereas in the 3rd episode, where it's actually the 2nd longest episode here, you also have 3 cycles of investigation in that one. It really just feels like you're not really progressing a lot from investigation to investigation. And the secrets that you're uncovering just feel so mundane. They really could have just been, discovered in like 2 rounds of investigation. There was no need to extend that to the 3rd one. So the 3rd episode definitely has a problem with the pacing of the investigation. The others I feel like are fine. The 5th episode does have a bit of a problem with pacing because it's very long. It's just really long. It just feels like it never ends. But I feel like it justifies it. I don't think it's a problem. It doesn't really feel like the story drags itself down or the pace becomes really slow. It takes a while, but it never really quite feels like... You're also always with this air of intensity surrounding it, because you're never quite sure about what is going on exactly. You never quite know what is going to happen. There's a little bit of that, tense atmosphere in the 5th episode that we'll get to later in the story that works well as well when it comes to the investigation. It's the only one where it really feels like you're actually in danger. Which is something that I kind of wish they used more. You never really feel like you're in danger of anything in any of the investigations. I mean, there's one where there's some danger, but not exactly towards the main character. And the danger has already happened, so it's not really that sort of, psychological danger that is always in the back of your mind while you're investigating. I feel like there should have been a little bit more of that. There was an avenue that could have been explored a bit more. Only really the 5th episode of this game felt like it. But yeah, overall the investigation for the 5th episode is pretty good. For the 3rd episode it's terrible. The pacing is really bad. The first 2 episodes, the investigation is very simple. The first episode, there's literally no investigation. The 2nd episode is very simple because you're just starting out. And then the 4th episode, I actually feel like it was the opposite. Like, I feel like they swapped. And we'll get to episode 3 as well. Like, the episode that should have had 3 investigation sessions was actually episode 4, not episode 3. Episode 3 should have only had 2 investigation sessions. Episode 4 should have had 3, because there's so much more intrigue to be uncovered, and with just the 2 sessions that you get in episode 4, it really just feels like everything just starts happening out of nowhere. Unfortunately, I actually feel like the pacing was the opposite. It was too fast, and revelation was starting to come left, right, and center without being properly built, especially since they were so major. But yeah, in terms of investigation, overall, the investigation process itself is kind of boring. And this is a problem for all the games. I mean, it's not exactly the most fun part, honestly. I guess talking to the characters is fun, but yeah, I'll get to the how the investigation was coded and gamified in the final review. I'll talk about gameplay more. I think I already talked a little bit about how this works. But yeah, just to give a little bit of context, I probably won't really focus on it at all. Maybe just in terms of pace in the next reviews. But yeah, when it comes to the courtroom, I think most of them do a decent job. Again, the pacing in the courtroom is usually good. Episode 4 has the issue that we'll get to later, that because they decide to just start revealing stuff left, right, and center all in the courtroom, it doesn't really feel organic, the developments that happen, personally, and I feel like we should have had more, because it's such major reveals that it definitely deserved more. But yeah, besides that, I feel like the evolution that happens inside of the courtroom is usually fine. The pace in the courtroom is fine. I feel like you never really drags on. It's actually usually pretty fun. The only times you're not really having fun inside the courtroom is when you're basically stuck and you don't know what piece of evidence you're gonna have to the game wants you to present to the judge. That's the only times the game is not fun. I will also talk about that in the final review. But yeah, overall that's about it. I guess we can start with the story. The story basically begins with the tutorial level, episode 1, where the main character has his first trial ever. He basically goes to trial and you're accompanied by Mia Fey, who is basically your teacher, or not really a teacher, but you know, senior that is kind of overseeing your trial and helping you out, showing you the ropes and that sort of stuff. The first episode is not really very complex. Yeah, I mean, the case is just there to really just tell you how the mechanics work, how you present evidence, how you listen to testimony, push for testimony, for the victim to explain themselves, and all that type of stuff. The case is okay, it serves perfectly fine as an introductory chapter. The reasoning for the main character being a bumbling mess, that basically is the whole premise of the tutorial, where Mia is explaining stuff to you because he's a bumbling mess, because he's nervous, because it's his first trial. It makes sense. It's not going to make as much sense in following games. They had to get creative to really allow you to get a tutorial session. But yeah, overall, there's nothing really more to say. I mean, as a case on its own, there's no investigation either, which means that finding the culprit is guilty is never really as cathartic as it would have been with a proper investigation. You're never really quite that, you know, tied to the characters, though we're also introduced to one of the most important supporting characters either, that is Larry Butts, the first offender of the story, which unfortunately does not get done very well. I think the story does him pretty dirty. Not in this game in particularly, but in the third game. But yeah, for the first game I actually do like what they did with Larry. I guess we'll get to that once we actually get to that in episode 4. But yeah, we're defending Larry, that has been accused of the murder of his girlfriend. Yeah, the whole mystery is very basic. It's fine as a tutorial. Again, this is not supposed to be life-changing anything. It's very basic. So yeah, overall, I'll just rank this chapter like a 5 out of 10. We get the general gist of how things work, of who the main character is, more or less. We get a little bit of a snippet as to why he became a defense attorney, with Larry being said to be to have been one of the main reasons. That does get retconned later, but yeah. We'll get to that when we get to that, I guess, in the third review. Move on to episode 2, and spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't played the game, if you do not, this review is going to contain spoilers from this point onwards. if you do not want to get spoiled, get out of the video right now. If you continue here, you're at your own risk. So yeah, episode 2 is the foundation of the entire series, really. This episode basically starts with Mia Fey, your master, not again your master, your senior, that was showing you the ropes as an attorney, gets killed. And the person who is deemed to be the culprit is her sister, Mia Fey, who is one of the few people that is actually found at the premises when the police is called by a woman in the hotel next door. The main character and Mia are found in there. Mia is the one who is taken into custody and deemed as the suspect. And now we have to go ahead and defend Mia. I actually don't even remember why exactly Phoenix decided that Mia was just not the culprit. I guess he just decided it. I don't think he was Maya. I don't think it was Mia that told him to defend Maya. So he just decided to defend Maya. I guess he just thought she was innocent and defended her with all his might. That's kind of crazy, honestly. Which, again, that is a trait in Phoenix, that he always believes in his own clients. But I don't think the game really did a good job at accurately portraying that, especially with a new mechanic they introduced in the second game. This big belief that Phoenix starts to build in certain people could have been something to be very heavily explored, especially considering another character that appears in the third game. I don't think they ever did anything. I don't think they went far enough in the exploration of this part of his character, unfortunately. But yeah, now we're basically tasked to defend Maya. So we go around doing our detective work as usual, and we end up finding out that Mia was actually investigating a certain suspicious individual called Wright. And for some reason, all of the files that Mia had on Wright were actually gone. But yeah, we eventually end up finding out about that. I mean, the first one is just trying to make sure that Maya is not seen as guilty in the first day. Speaking of guilty, the person we're defending Maya against is Prosecutor Edgeworth, which is going to be our rival for the game, and is, alongside Larry Butts, the second reason Phoenix presents as to why he became a defense attorney. Edgeworth is also kind of like Phoenix's rival throughout the entirety of the first game. But yeah, and overall that's more or less the gist of it. We end up finding out that Mia was actually investigating this White fella, and that most of the stuff about White was gone. The entire W section on the files was gone, while someone took over all of it. But they forgot something else, a random book where Mia hid something else. And that's how things end up finding the connection and stuff. We end up finding out that White is someone who has a lot of power in the world, has blackmail on all political figures. And Mia was investigating him because he was somehow involved with the disappearance of her mother. And that's why she was investigating him and trying to bring him to justice. There's a lot more plot details here, which, again, I don't even think you need to go that deeply into these plot details, because unfortunately they don't really go anywhere really that deeply with any of it. To be perfectly honest, this case does come back a little bit later. But yeah, I'll get to the problems I have with the way this story is structured later. Because again, these details that you have relating to the DDL6 case that involved, you know, Mia and Maya's mother, where she was tasked to go ahead and perform a spiritual channeling to discover who the killer of a certain case was. Um, it does get brought up later, but it never really has the cathartic climax that it should have, for multiple reasons, in my opinion. And this DDL6 case is actually brought up several times as well, which is pretty interesting, I guess. But yeah, this doesn't really matter that much. Overall, what you need to do about this episode is that, yeah, basically, Phoenix managed to go ahead and cast some doubt on the fact that Maya is actually the culprit that killed Mia. He actually managed to go ahead and cast some doubt on the testimony of the person that was accusing Maya of being the killer, basically based on the geography and inconsistencies in what they say they saw. Then we got to the second day, where you basically actually go around hunting for White, getting him into trial, and then eventually finding him guilty. White ends up admitting to the guilt, even though he basically controlled all the courts and could be found not guilty. At any point in time, he actually got blackmail on the judge himself, so he could have been found guilty, not guilty, if he wanted to. But yeah, Phoenix ends up managing to go ahead and blackmail White by telling him that he would release the names of all the people he blackmailed, which in turn would basically lead those people just kill him. Once they knew, once that name was out, and he basically just accepts being sent to prison. Overall, I guess we'll start with a few of the positives that I noted. I actually found it cool that you have two different paths to get information on the leader of Blue Corp, White. You still didn't really know that he was a leader of Blue Corp at this point. You could either blackmail the girl with her appearance. Yeah, there would basically be two pictures inside of a certain house. It would be the house of Rosenberg, I think. He was another attorney, and inside of his desk there would be a point in time where there would be two pictures, one of which would be the picture of White himself, and the other one would be the picture of a woman. And this woman didn't really look like anyone we saw before, but I think I didn't really test it, but I'm pretty sure that woman was actually the first accuser that said she saw Maya killing Mia. But she looked completely different, and then you ask your question why. It's probably what she looked like before the plastic surgery, and that's also probably the reason why she was doing this for White. White was blackmailing her by basically telling her he would release the picture of what she looked like before, where she was pretty ugly. But I mean, not even ugly, just plain looking. He would just release that, and that's why she was compliant. So basically, you would blackmail her instead, and she would tell you where White was. That's what I think. So think about it anyway. And the other way is actually just straight up going to Rosenberg and showing him the picture of White and pressuring him to tell you where exactly he is. So that's a good thing, I feel like. As for the rest of the story here, I don't really mind the first part with the witness and stuff. What I do feel like is that, honestly, I feel like White was a wasted villain. And for two main reasons. The first one, obviously, he was deeply tied with the personal story of Mia and Maya. Very deeply connected with those two. Actually, how exactly was White connected with Mia and Maya? I remember that. I'm actually not sure, because the story then changes a little bit. I mean, the DL6 file gets connected to something else. I guess White basically leaked the story to the press, basically. That's it. Yeah, that's it. Basically, Mia and Maya's mother did a spirit channeling to find out who the culprit of a certain murder case was, because the police was not able to find the culprit, and they asked them, and then in the trial that individual ends up being proven innocent. I mean, it was kind of weird. He wasn't really proven innocent. He was just proven that he was mentally incapable. So I don't even know what the problem was there. I mean, he was never really proven innocent, just mentally impaired. I mean, it feels kind of weird personally. It doesn't really feel, it feels kind of disjointed, that whole narrative. But yeah, and then White leaked the narrative that he was Maya's and Mia's mother. That used the spirit channeling to help the police, which then basically led to the entire spirit channeling community being discredited as fakes and phonies, and led to basically her disappearance, which was why Mia was after him. So yeah, White was basically responsible for the destruction of the image of the spirit channeling community. Both Mia and Maya are also spirit channelers, by the way, and that is also responsible for the disappearance of their mother, which disappeared. We don't really know why she disappeared exactly. That's never really explained. We'll get to that when you get to the third game. We never really get a reason as to why she disappeared. But yeah, she disappeared. Her disappearance also only caused even more issues to the spirit channeling community as well. But well, whatever. But yeah, White, being that deeply tied with Mia and Maya, feels like it was a waste to just get rid of them that early. I feel like, I mean, for Mia, not anymore since she's dead, but for Maya in specific, it would have been interesting to have maybe something in the back of her mind, some sort of goal, someone to catch out there. It would have been interesting to have that around for longer. Another thing is that it would also work for Mia, because again, as we know, Mia can actually appear, even though she's dead, through the spirit channeling. She can actually appear in Maya's body. So Mia would not. I think Mia having all of the clues was a mistake. I feel like her slowly piecing it together along the way, along one or two games, would actually be very nice. Her solving a mystery that she never really managed to solve yet. I mean, I feel like her having all of the evidence ready just doesn't feel right. This is a guy that blackmailed all of the country, and he basically just lets himself get caught by some random second-rate attorney. I know that Mia is not second-rate, but come on, man. What are we kidding about here? Like, seriously? I feel like, I mean, her investigation should have basically been at a dead end. She got maybe some small lead. I mean, having everything, even the records of everyone you blackmailed, that's too far, man. And yeah, the second issue I have with White falling this far is that the progression of intensity in the story and stakes just kind of falls apart with White being caught so early. White is basically the most powerful individual we meet in all of the games, all of the 3 games following Phoenix Wright, and he basically gets caught on episode 2. Again, White has blackmail on politicians, on judges, on cops, on attorneys, on prosecutioners. He has blackmail on everyone. In the Prime Minister, maybe. How exactly are we going to be catching someone like this on the second episode? And with something so minor as well. Just, I mean, I know that it was the death of a major character, but it's something so minor, just a kill. And that's it. We never really get a massive conspiracy involving White later on. I feel like it's a mistake in terms of progression, because we never really feel like we have any stakes that high anymore. This is a problem for another episode that we have, that I never feel like we quite reach the same stakes as we reached in episode 5. The same with White. Though the thing is, episode 5 itself was already kind of hurt by White, because again, White would be above the culprit of episode 5. He would be above everyone. And this happens on episode 2 on a minor trial that still works kind of like a tutorial trial to tell you how the game works. So, I mean, the progression of stakes really just gets completely screwed by this. Another issue I have with the way White was portrayed, I mean, it's the way White was portrayed. Exactly. He really was not portrayed as this, intimidating figure that was going around blackmailing everyone. He literally was introduced as a joke. Like, the guy literally looked like a gag character, acted like a gag character. I mean, we're building up again. This is another problem. This is ties to the previous problem that White is built up as this massively larger than life individual, and yet he ends up being just a random schmo in terms of appearance, in terms of how he conducts himself. He just looks like a dumbass, an idiot. Yeah, Imperius can be say, but come on, man. I don't really want to be seeing any sort of subversion of expectations with a character that is this important, not just in-game, in-universe, but to the characters themselves. I feel like that's stupid, man. I mean, everything about White is just too simplistic for what it's supposed to represent. You basically get to spend like what 15 minutes with him on trial, and that's it. Over. It just doesn't feel right. I personally feel like this would be the main change I would make in this game. That the guy that we find out here is actually not White. You'll be just someone else, like a random CEO that White just blackmails. I actually thought this was exactly what was gonna happen. We're building up White as someone was gonna be, someone very big in the world that we're gonna be have to working a lot through multiple episodes, multiple games to get to. And this was just the introduction, but I was wrong, evidently. So yeah, instead of that, what I would change is I would make the guy that is White in the canon games, and just make him into someone else. It would just be some random CEO. I mean, he would still be powerful, that CEO, but I mean, he would just be the CEO of Blue Corp. It would actually be an actual corporation. Then he could be the quirky, funny gag character that he was. But White would not appear in this game in the slightest. I mean, Mia would have some clues about White, but not a lot. I mean, their investigation would have hit a dead end. She would not have had anything else. She only had a rough idea of the existence of a White as someone who blackmailed people. Most of our files have been removed. And honestly, I don't even feel like Phoenix should have found that, that that random box of information that he found right at the end of the case to just, tell White to just accept it, or I'm gonna release all of this to the public. I mean, Mia having access to that just doesn't sit right with me. I'm sorry. So yeah, instead, Mia would have hit to that end an investigation. The person that we actually found guilty in this case would actually not even be White. It would just be someone else. He would actually still be the killer that killed Mia, but he would actually be working under White's orders instead of being White himself. And then as for White, during this case we would actually find a little bit of a trace, and we would actually be able to get a little bit closer to White than Mia actually got. But yeah, we never really know who White was, and White basically achieved what he wanted. He stole all the documents Mia had, because there was actually something there that he did not really know, didn't really want anyone to have, even though Mia herself had not really realized that there was something there that was dangerous to White. That's why he told two people to go ahead and organize an assassination. And yet White himself would be saved for later. Particularly, if I can spoil myself, my final review, I would save him for the 5th episode of the second game, which doesn't really exist. It would be the perfect case to end the second game. But yeah, as it stands, this case, I think the case itself was fine. I just don't like the wasted potential of the characters and the narrative here. I feel like it would have been so much better the way I said it, the way I said it, if the killer actually was not White, just someone under White's orders. And I feel like because the case itself is fine as a simple case, you go around back and forth a little bit. I think it's interesting. Edgeworth himself is also pretty good in this episode. It's really the only episode really feels like Edgeworth is an actual menace. After this one, he starts mellowing out a little bit, and we never really quite get a rival as good as episode 1 Edgeworth again. All the other prosecutors we face are not quite as strong, in my opinion. Maybe the final one, Godot from the third game, but even still, I don't think he's quite as strong as a rival compared to Edgeworth. I mean, Edgeworth is the only one that outright forges evidence in this episode. He literally forges evidence, by the way. He makes up false evidence in the middle of the trial to make sure he gets his verdict. We don't really see anyone else doing it. I mean, Von Karma Sim, that is the second or the third prosecutor we face. Franziska Von Karma seemingly does it, I think, but what she does more is like hide evidence. She doesn't really fabricate it, she just hides it. But I do think she also did it, but I think it was minor. Like, Edgeworth's was really big and he was really on your face what he did to the evidence. He literally just went ahead and forged a medical report to make sure Maya absolutely could have been the one killing. But yeah, overall as a case, 7 out of 10. It could have been. I don't think even if the changes that I made to the case, I don't even think those changes would have made the case better, because they don't really fundamentally change anything. What they would do, however, is make for a more coherent narrative on the whole, and will obviously create a much more interesting case later on. But yeah, I mean, overall, just a 7 out of 10. Pretty decent case, not too complex, but still enjoyable. And as for, well, episode 3 now. Unlike the previous one, I'm probably gonna stop explaining the entire, making a summary of every episode. Otherwise, this review is never gonna end. So yeah, I mean, overall, I'm just gonna say what happens. I'm not gonna go into details. So yeah, there's a murder in a cinema studio, I think. I think it's a cinema studio, a random. One of the actors is found dead inside of a costume with a hole on his chest. And the accused is basically the actor who actually plays with that costume. And, well, we can instantly tell that the person that is being accused is obviously not the culprit. But yeah, long story short, the actual killer ended up being the director. The guy that was killed was actually stole the costume from our defendant, and he was planning on assassinating the director of the cinema studio, because the director of the cinema studio was blackmailing him and forcing him to do stuff that he didn't want to do, basically treating him like a slave. Because in the past, during a sequence where the guy was an actor, an accident happened, and another actor ended up being pushed off the stairs and into some wiring, into some fence, and ended up getting himself killed that way. It was an accident. The guy that died was basically alluded to have been the director's boyfriend or husband or something, and she held a grudge against him and was making his life hell. So the actor decided to put on the costume and kill her and frame the other guy, our defendant. But things go wrong for him because the director ends up pushing him off the stairs as well, like by mistake, by the way, more like in self-defense, really, which was basically the same as it happened to him when he pushed the other guy off the stairs by mistake. and he ends up falling on the same place the other guy died and dies himself, and then he's transported to another place. But that's more or less what happens. As for this episode, well, this episode is clearly filler. There's nothing really here that is tied to the story of any of the characters. There's not really any growth for anyone. There's not really any exploration for any character. There's nothing really connected to the story. So, I mean, this is what I would call one of those filler cases that just happens to kind of fill up space. On itself, just by itself, that is a negative, obviously, because that makes the story less interesting and less engaging. You're less invested in the case if it doesn't have any connection with the rest of the story. I mean, it is what it is. So on that alone, it feels like a filler case. So you already have to discount points here. The defendant, well, I mean, he's an okay defendant, I guess. Another subversion of expectations. The big burly guy is actually very emotional and what have you, and lacking in confidence and stuff. But yeah, the first thing I'll have to mention about episode 3 is obviously the fact that the pacing is terrible in this episode. I had already mentioned before that the pacing of the investigation just doesn't feel like you're going anywhere. We spend a lot of time investigating for clues, for not even a lot of clues, and for clues that don't really feel that important. We don't really feel like we make any progress either. We make very slow progress, and the narrative that is being built just doesn't really warrant that sort of time investment. This trial could easily have been simply 2 days instead of 3. It would be perfectly fine with just 2 days instead of 3. There was no reason for it to have been 3 days. They just stretched this out. Too long, too much. Was not good at all. And a lot of the time was not even used on something interesting. We spent most of the time going around dealing with, old bags, antics, and trying to get the kid to tell the truth. We never really actually get to the interesting parts, that is, for instance, the killer himself, or herself in this case. We never really actually get to see anything about her. She just shows up again 10 minutes at the end, and that's it. We barely even get to talk to her either. I mean, we never really get to see anything about the killer, which once again gets the conviction that we get, makes it less interesting. But yeah, this episode absolutely suffers from poor pacing, and for all the time that they spend in this episode, they don't really use it effectively on good stuff, on actually exploring the interesting characters here. Not Old Wag, not the kid, nobody cares about those. Actually, the killer, for instance. One thing that we did get was, our ties with the mafia. I feel like the kidnap came out of nowhere. It really felt unnecessary as well, since, it doesn't really lead to any consequences. Just Gumshoe just shows up and saves us instantly. It doesn't really feel like they went anywhere. I mean, they just pulled that out of their asses, and 1 second later it's resolved. I mean, that kind of feels like a waste. If you're actually gonna make it have ties to the mafia, actually commit to that bit. Don't just make them show up literally as the investigation is finished and then Gumshoe just saves us. Like, come on, man. I mean, I don't even think the mafia stuff was necessary. I mean, there was literally only there to make some very quick, dramatic scene that never really went anywhere, never really had any build up, never really had any consistency. Not consistency. It never really had any depth to anything. It just was there to shock you. It was a shock to see the mafia rushing at you to kill you. But honestly, that just feels like weak writing, honestly. It doesn't really feel... That's kind of like hack writing, just shock value for the sake of shock value. I don't think there was any necessity to make her have ties to the mafia. But I still think she could have made even the case itself. I feel like it was not really done personally in the way I would have done it. In all honesty, there's a lot of people as well. Like one particular character in here is involved, but it doesn't really. They don't really use him for anything. That being, it's the other guy. It's the fuck. You have the director, and you have the other one. I forgot the name of his position. But yeah, that guy is only there to annoy me basically because I hate reading the text. It's so annoying to read his lines because he has like that quirky writing style because he's one of those quirky characters and needs to talk like that. I don't find it funny. I just find it annoying having to deal with that guy. So the guy basically was not even involved at all in the mystery. So at that point, why even have him? Why even have that guy? Either remove him or involve him in the crime. Since he's not really going to be a roadblock like the kid or old bag, he's just there to do a very quick apparition in the courtroom and then leave. I feel like you either remove him or use him for the crime scene, which I personally would have used him for the crime. I will tell you what I would have done with this episode later. But yeah. What else? I feel like the trial itself, overall, I think it was fine again. Usually the trials are solid. I mean, Edgeworth is a little bit milder in this case. I mean, I personally am not exactly the biggest fan. I mean, Edgeworth being, always caught off guard by Old Bag. I mean, it's funny at first, but it gets old. I would prefer Edgeworth being, a little bit more ruthless on trial and not standing on business for anyone. When the director actually finally appears on trial, it's actually also pretty nice to see. Which again makes it feel more of a shame that she didn't really get used anymore. We didn't really get to interact at all with her. But yeah, overall, I think the trial was fine. The only part of the trial that I really dislike is the part with that guy that has the quirky dialogue. And in fact, let me see if well, I actually have on my notes. I have that guy called the camera guy, so I guess we'll call him the camera guy. But yeah, the camera guy. Why would they have that choice in text? I mean, that's so annoying. I hate those quirky characters whenever they appear because sometimes I cannot even understand what they're saying. Yeah, it's just annoying, man. It's just annoying. Just put it, maybe like one word written in a quirky way is fine, but the complete logs of text written like that is just a massive pain to read. So yeah, let me talk about what I would change actually in this episode. First, I would cut down the episode into just 2 rounds of investigation. So there would only be 2 days. There would be no third day. In the first day, you would get everything related to Old Bag and the kid. You get all of that in only one trial. And then in the second trial, you would actually be investigating the killer. Now, plot twist, I would actually change the killer. I'm changing everyone's killer. I mean, you wouldn't really be changing characters. You would just change the person who kills. So, the victim still dresses himself as the samurai, the machine samurai, the steel samurai. And he still goes to the second studio. He still goes to the second studio. He then tries to assault the director who is at the stairs. There's kind of like a struggle in there. And the camera guy, which would actually have been eating meat just nearby, hiding himself, stuffing his face with meat, would have appeared, seen that, and just come rushing, and just pushed off the guy to take him off the director and to help the director. And well, he pushes him with too much strength and ends up pushing him off the stairs and into the fences, the iron fences, and the guy ends up dying. So he basically changed it from the director being the one who kills him to the camera guy. I feel like it makes more sense this way. I don't feel like it makes any sense for the director to have been able to just push him off. And there's several reasons for that. First of all, either he catches the director, I mean, he's always going to catch the director off guard. She's never really going to ever guard up until the Steel Samurai comes close enough to do anything to her. Second, the director is a woman, and yeah, well, women can be just as strong as men. No, come on. Yeah, the director is a woman. First of all, she's weaker physically. Second of all, she's gonna be caught off guard because she's not gonna know that the Steel Samurai is gonna be trying to kill her. Second, third, she's in high heels, which obviously is not very good for balance, especially in the stairs. So again, it makes much more sense for the guy to just grab her, and it would take a while. It would take a while not kill her instantly because he would want to kind of just release all the rage he had at the moment, and that gives just enough time for the other guy to see that come right from behind and push him off. He wouldn't really want to kill him. He just wanted to, push him off the director. But he ends up pushing him off, and the guy ends up dying. And then the camera guy is shocked that he just killed someone. And well, the director ends up helping him devise a plan to hide the body. The director would actually have some complex feelings on the matter because she herself would know that the reason this whole thing happened was because of her. So she technically would have been the one who killed the actor, since she was the one who was basically haunting him for the last few years because of the accident of back then. She basically was making his life a living hell to the point where he was willing to just kill her. And, the camera guy pushed him off, yes, but in reality the one who killed him was actually her. So she would feel bad for that. And I would actually also go ahead and make the camera guy and the director actually have a good relationship. Like, the camera guy would really respect the director, and he would be like some random guy on the street who would make some amateur films and that nobody really cared about, but the director would have been the one who saw his talent and brought him in. So she was kind of like, someone he really respected, which is why he tried to save her. And on the other hand, yeah, the director would then basically try to hide everything in the trial, precisely, and she would try to actually get herself incriminated instead, because in reality she was the one who was responsible for all of it. Now, and her trying to get powers, making powers the main suspect, was always the plan. Actually, I still don't know exactly how. I will admit, because I mean, if she was actually selfish and just trying to, not get caught, it makes sense. I'd have to find a way. I mean, either she was already expecting Powers to not be found guilty somehow, yeah, actually, maybe that's interesting. Instead of it being Olvbach that gives us, the information about the accident that happened before, it's actually the director that just leaves it lying on her table. While she's out, we go into the house and we find that file. It was actually the director who left it there, trying to steer us into a certain direction that would get her found guilty. But yeah, eventually Phoenix has already, and the judge is about to declare judgment that the director is, in fact, the culprit, but Phoenix refuses it because he kind of wants to go and find the real truth, no matter how much it hurts anyone. That's his philosophy. And that's when we'd actually find out that in reality it was actually not her that killed him. He was actually the camera guy that killed him. And this would actually hurt the director even more. I feel that the director, being a much more innocent person, would make her character a little bit more interesting. I feel like you make it feel pretty human as well. She made a massive mistake. She created a grudge, which is an understandable grudge, but honestly, absolutely not something she should have done. A terrible behavior, in fact, tormenting the guy like that. And her actions ended up leading one more person to die. Because in fact, she would have known that even back in the day, the reason why the accident happened in the first place was because they did not do security checks as well as they should have. I mean, it was simply just an accident. But yeah, her actions afterwards led to the death of someone else, and the camera guy, which she valued very deeply. She valued his talents a lot. As a cameraman, an innocent guy like that would also be going to prison as well for something that she herself started. So I feel like she would have been a lot more of a human character. There's no need to have any ties to the mafia in that way. I feel like her character would be pretty interesting on its own. This way, just a simple, misguided person. But yeah, with the way the story developed, I would say that it's just not interesting. The pacing is not that good. We spend it on a lot of worthless stuff, a lot of comedy. I mean, there's no connection to the story. There's no growth of characters. Overall, literally just a filler episode that has pacing issues with, as it's very common for filler stuff to have. It's not actually filler, by the way. It's canon, but it basically feels like a filler episode in between the canon parts of the story. Overall, I mean, I can't give it more than a 5.5. Maybe a 6 out of 10. Maybe a 6 out of 10. I feel like if they did it the way I said it, with better pacing, making the characters more interesting as well, particularly the director and the camera guy, I feel like this could actually have been an 8 out of 10. Yeah, maybe I'm biased because it's my own idea, but yeah. But the way it is, at most a 6 out of 10. 4. I'm gonna slightly cut down from this point onwards the descriptions of the episodes, because from episode 4 and 5 they get really long and expensive, so I'm not really gonna spend too much time recounting the events, just an overall overview of what happened in the case. This case was basically, this episode 4 basically starts off with Edgeworth being in prison, and obviously the main character tries to represent him. I mean, Edgeworth supposedly thinks he's innocent. He doesn't really believe he did the crime, but he's also not entirely sure that he wasn't the one who did it. So he's kind of confused as to his guilt in relation to this case. He was kind of, a little bit with his mind shaken when this thing was taking place. So he doesn't even know if exactly he was responsible for the crime or if he was not. But yeah, regardless, the main character believes Edgeworth is innocent and decides to defend him anyway. This whole episode is basically structured as the main focal point for the development of the main character's main rival, Edgeworth, who starts off as obviously this evil, corrupt prosecutor who goes around, forging testimonies, forging evidence to get his win and to get every single person that he could get his hands on into jail. His whole personal philosophy being that, if he basically sends every single defendant to jail, he's making sure that every single culprit and inmate is going to jail as well. So his objective is not really to find the truth, it's just to convict everyone, because by convicting everyone, he's basically removing all the real the real the real the real culprits, the people who actually committed crimes, the criminals, is basically sending them all to jail. And if he has to go ahead and send 1, 2, 3, 4, 10 more people, more innocent people to jail than culprits, then he's totally fine with it, which, then it comes as a little bit of a karma in this one, where, he thinks he's innocent. At least he thinks so. He's not sure, but he thinks he's innocent. But if he was following his own ideology, he needed to be sent to prison. The issue is, though, in this case, even if he was to follow his own ideology and he basically got himself sent to prison, in this case he knows that the real culprit would be getting off scot-free. So maybe this idea of sending everyone to jail maybe sounds right at first, but it can come with some consequences, unintended consequences, where sometimes very big culprits and very dangerous culprits end up getting away scot-free because the first person that appears in front of the investigation is thrown to jail. So yeah, we also get to learn a little bit about why Edgeworth acts the way he does, and there's two reasons as to why he acts the way he does. The first reason, the ideology of wanting to send everyone to jail, no matter what, is related to the fact that Edgeworth's father was killed, and the culprit was never caught and was never sent to jail. At this point in time, Edgeworth still believes that the culprit was an individual that was deemed too insane to be sent to prison, and all the charges against them ended up being dropped. So obviously Edgeworth feels like justice was not served in there, and so basically to prevent another situation like this one from ever happening again, where the culprit just squirms his way out of a trial, Edgeworth makes damn sure that everyone gets sent to jail, even if he has to go as far as forging evidence for it. The other reason as to why he does this is basically his foster father. After his father was killed, by the way, the person that Edgeworth thinks killed his father was actually not the real culprit either. So once again, his ideology is kind of proven wrong in this case. They purposefully do it. They purposefully smash Edgeworth's ideology from multiple angles, just to really showcase that the way he was doing things was wrong, even if he had some noble ideals in that. Though most of it was still very revenge based. A lot of it was really revenge based. He still had not gotten over the situation with his father, and he was basically kind of lashing out at everything that reminded him of that situation. There was a noble ideal behind it, but that honestly felt more like the excuse Edgeworth gave to make his actions seem more morally acceptable, or the excuse he gave to himself, when in reality it feels more like he was still trying to get revenge for what happened with his father. It just never worked because he was never getting the right person. He was just always projecting that onto other cases. But yeah, regardless. And the other thing that is explained here is that Edgeworth, after his father died, he was actually taken in by a new foster father, a foster family, that is the Von Karma family, and more specifically Von Karma, the guy who was basically a genius prosecutor, was never defeated in his life. And obviously a lot of the dirty tricks that Edgeworth uses of tampering with evidence, trying to force a result in the trial, no matter what, try to get a conviction no matter what, also comes a little bit from the influence from this Von Karma, was basically the one who raised him to be like that. A little bit, though Von Karma acts in this way not really for revenge for what happened with his father and for a noble ideal of getting all criminals. Von Karma only really acts like this to keep his perfect score. He's basically completely self-centered. The only thing he cares about is winning his trials, nothing else. He doesn't care about the case, doesn't care about the truth, doesn't care about society, doesn't care about anything besides winning his cases. And yes, he's willing to go as far as it takes, according to Edgeworth, 10 times worse than what he did to Phoenix. So he's kind of set up as this main, massive, horrible guy, really. That really has the and with the amount of influence he's been, a prosecutor for like 40 years, never lost. So the amount of influence he would have as well on the judges, on the prosecutor's office, on everything, on the police department, would be huge. So it'd be uh, a massive difficulty for them. Wright, Phoenix, with none of that. I mean, the way he was able to go ahead and, get the police in his pockets, change evidence, would they be able to do all of that, creating a really hard challenge? Von Karma would be the one, by the way, prosecuting against Edgeworth, which kind of starts you questioning what exactly is going on here. Isn't he the foster father? I mean, I thought that maybe, you know, Von Karma was a type of character who really just would not put his feelings on the matter in it at all. He was just going to prosecute it no matter what. If Edgeworth was guilty or not, that was up to Phoenix or the defense attorney to prove, not him. It doesn't matter if it's the son or whatever. I thought he was going to be that kind of impartial character, but clearly he was not like that, the development. So yeah, as for the crime itself, um, it happens on a lake. Someone shoots another person from the... Well, I'm just going to say it like that. The person, Edgeworth, is basically called to a location. This location has a lake, and him and the person who called him go on the get on a boat and get into the middle of the lake. The person who called Edgeworth is actually the person who I mentioned before, the person that was too insane to be deemed guilty of killing Edgeworth's father. That's the person who called him to a lake. I mean, he went ahead and talked about the murder of his father. That's what caught Edgeworth's attention. So yeah, they both get into a lake. The guy with the guy with the insane guy basically shoots not at Edgeworth, but shoots in Edgeworth's direction, making it seem like he shot Edgeworth. Then jumps into the water, basically making it seem like he was Edgeworth who shot him, and then just swims all the way back to his house. And Edgeworth stays there in shock, grabs the gun by mistake because he's shell shocked, and then obviously his prints are all over the gun and whatever. Yeah, this was basically how the crime went. The body that was discovered was the body of another. Was it an attorney or a defense attorney or a prosecutor? I don't remember, but it was someone that was related to the case already. He was either the one who I think he was the one who defended the insane guy. I think that's the guy that ended up being killed. Yeah, he ended up being called to the same place earlier, then dumped into the water, and then Edgeworth was called there. And then when the police arrived, they also ended up finding the body on the lake and the gun on Edgeworth's with Edgeworth's prints. So yeah, in reality, we later end up finding out that the guy, this insane guy, wasn't even the one who planned all of this. The person who planned the entire thing was actually Von Karma himself. Von Karma apparently wanted to incriminate Edgeworth and ruin his life. Phoenix ends up basically finding out the connection between this murder and the other one. He also ends up finding out that also the person who killed Edgeworth's father was actually not the insane guy either. He was Von Karma, funnily enough. And basically then Von Karma ends up being convicted of both crimes. So basically being involved with the murder related to Edgeworth and killing Edgeworth's father. And that's how basically the chapter ends. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail into particularly the developments of the characters and stuff, but yeah, overall that's the general gist of what happens in this chapter. Overall, despite the ideas in this chapter being very good, the underlying themes of this chapter being very interesting, the development of the characters being very interesting, I feel like the execution of the episode was not the best. On the one hand, the episode was great for character development and character exploration, for Edgeworth in particular, but even for Phoenix a little bit. And showed us some great moments. Again, all this challenging of Edgeworth's ideology, we getting to see his backstory, why he became the way he became, how he developed his ideology, the influence certain people had on him, and seeing him overcome those bindings was obviously very well written. Phoenix himself had some interesting moments in this chapter, particularly. We got we actually got to know why Phoenix ended up trusting the people that he defends so heavily, because that's a very strong and core component of Phoenix, is his inexplicable belief in his clients. The way he is able to, at least in this game, I think they kind of trivialize this aspect of Phoenix's character in future games, but in this one, it's very clear. Like, he really believes in his clients, even though sometimes all of the all of the odds are against them. They have clear evidence linking them to the crimes, and he still believes that his clients are innocent, and he goes and defends them until the last drop of sweat. And it's also kind of like, I mean, does he never really develop any sort of mistrust over his own distrust over his own clients? Does he never, get a little bit shaky on his, beliefs? How does this work? How can he just continuously believe something like that when, you know, his clients are it all points to them being guilty? So how does this work exactly? And well, we kind of get the answer here with, we get a little bit of a backstory from Phoenix, where both Edgeworth and Larry are present. So we basically get kind of tie up the loose ends a little bit. It was already kind of a retcon that Edgeworth was also involved, but it's the first game I guess they can allow. I would like really call it a retcon, more like an expansion, because Larry was originally told, Phoenix told us originally that Larry was the reason why he became a defense attorney. They didn't really tell us he was part of the reason, so Edgeworth was added later. So I guess you can call it a bit of a retcon. Then Mia being added way later is also a massive retcon, because it doesn't really, the timeline doesn't work. So I mean, I guess you can make an argument that he was still very young when this event that I'm going to be explaining happened, and then later on Mia ended up reigniting that passion in him. It feels kind of weird though, kind of wonky. It feels like they kind of trivialize what happens in this moment. But yeah, the same with Larry later on. Larry's role gets trivialized in like the third game a lot more, which I don't appreciate. But yeah, in this game, both Larry and Edgeworth are the reason why he became a defense attorney, and also why he believes in his client so much. Because back in his childhood, there was a situation where Phoenix was basically accused of being the one who stole some money that was being used for some school trip. And according to all the evidence, he was the only one who could have done it, because he was the only one that was like free to do it. Like, he was around the vicinity to do it. Nobody else could have. So everyone was just accusing him left, right, and center. Nobody believed in him, but Phoenix himself knew that he had not stolen anything. But how could he argue himself out of that situation when all the facts were pointing against him? And it was then Edgeworth who stood up for him, and told him that if he says he didn't do it, then he did not do it. So yeah, Phoenix in that situation knows how it is to basically have the entire world pointing at you, telling you that you are the culprit, you are the one who did it, that you did not do it, but all the facts are pointing at your face, and you're basically completely alone with everyone just pointing their fingers at you, and you being thrown under the bus, completely alone without anyone to support you. And then what he felt with both Edgeworth and then Larry also backing him up. Edgeworth starts by defending him, and Larry also continues defending him afterwards as well. He felt like the difference that it made, having someone there for him, to stand up for him. Uh, Both Edgeworth and Larry were that for him in his childhood, so he knows what it's like to be completely alone in that scenario. So what he doesn't want to do is basically let his client um, be in that situation as well, where nobody believes in them. If every single fact is pointing at the fact that they are guilty, if nobody believes in them, he at the very least wants to be the one person who is standing up for his client no matter what, so that they don't really well, so that nobody has to go through that suffering of every the entire world against you, without you not even being able to argue or defend yourself at all. He doesn't want anyone to go through that experience, and that's why he always believes in his clients, because if he stops believing in them, they'll be completely alone and have nobody else to believe in them in a lot of these cases. So that's why he has always this firm belief in his clients. Like the thought that his clients may even be guilty doesn't even cross his mind, because it's not really his objective. His objective is to basically be on the side of his client and support him through this. This gets a little bit muddied later on, when, you know, if his client is actually guilty, for instance. But yeah, usually though, starting off, Phoenix just believes in his client fully and goes to the end, trying to find the truth of the matter, always assuming his client is guilty. Then, if by getting to the bottom of the truth it's impossible, there's no possible way that his client is not guilty, then he changes his approach. But yeah, this basically explains why he never really has any doubts, why he never really adds the possibility that his client may have been the culprit until it's basically 100% obvious, and this only really happens once in the entire trilogy. But yeah, so that's actually a very nice characterization for Phoenix overall, very interesting. Even if it gets a little bit trivialized later, I like it. The development of Edgeworth is also well done. I feel like the main issue is not really, again, it's not really the character development, the character explorations, and the character building that happens in this episode. It's more the plot itself. I feel like the plot was not put together very well. I think the ideas are interesting again. The whole Von Karma stuff was interesting. I just don't think it was well constructed. The trial was fun, I guess, as it usually is. It's always fun. Trials, I don't think there's really a trial that is like boring. They're usually always fun, the back and forths. This was actually less fun than usual, because I don't think Von Karma is that engaging of an enemy. Is pretty bland. I mean, yes, Ace Attorney can get to the point where, you know, your rival attorney, your rival prosecutor, I mean, can get a little bit annoying, like what happens throughout the entire second game. They go too far with the wackiness. But honestly, I think they found the perfect balance with Edgeworth and even Godot later. But even Edgeworth, I feel like you don't really get anything that surpasses Edgeworth with how intimidating they are in the first trial. Yeah, I mean, I feel like Von Karma is pretty bland overall. I don't really feel like he's that interesting, but overall the trial is fun. Um, as usual, they're usually always pretty fun. The reaction shots from Phoenix and stuff, they're always pretty fun. But yeah, well, starting with the issues with the plot, the first issue and the main issue, in fact, I have with this episode is the main villain of the episode, Von Karma himself. As I said before, he is built up as this infamous prosecutor who basically has an 100% success rate in prosecuting. He has been prosecuting for 40 years at this point, and he has not lost a single trial. He has won every single time. Has a perfect resume. Perfect. There's a tiny blemish on it that we'll get to later. But yeah, it's a perfect resume. And then Edgeworth himself not only tells him that Von Karma is extremely competent, far more competent than Edgeworth is himself, but he's also willing to play dirty, far more dirty than Edgeworth himself. Well, here's the main problem though. Actually, there's two problems. First of all, Von Karma never feels like he is that competent of a prosecutor. I mean, you can say that the reason why he won everything was because of false evidence. I don't buy that, because he had to start from somewhere, and for him to be able to start getting the false evidence through, he had to at least have been able to go ahead and get his reputation up first, before he would be able to dabble on false evidence as hard as he could to hide his own shortcomings as a prosecutor. So I don't buy that. He had to have been good, and in fact they reinforced that he was actually a genius later on in the series. But yeah, he just doesn't feel that strong of a prosecutor. The case that he makes, honestly, it's supposed to be a perfect case. I mean, it gets broken through very easily by Phoenix. He never quite has a lot of countermeasures. He has like his plan laid out. His plan is usually very straightforward though. Like Phoenix is able to challenge his plan very easily, and then after his plan is challenged, he kind of doesn't really know. He doesn't really have any backup. Like with Edgeworth, you always feel like he has something up his sleeve. He's kind of leading you into a trap. With Von Karma, he never really feels like it, and whenever he actually is leading you into a trap, it's it's the most obvious trap ever. He doesn't really set any subtle traps for Phoenix to fall into and to penalize himself later. He doesn't really show that dominance. He was just going ahead, throwing evidence after evidence after evidence after evidence, just piling everything onto you, piling on the pressure, never letting up. He can't even control his own witnesses. Like, what are we doing here? This is supposed to be the most infamous, the best prosecutor in history. He never quite feels like it. Like, he doesn't really put up much of a fight, especially later on when he's the one being accused of murder. Again, I get he was not prepared for it, but neither was Phoenix prepared to, accuse him of murder. Like, if he was actually competent, he would have had that prepared for years, in case he was ever accused of anything, by the way. But he just feels like he doesn't put up a fight at all. Like, where is all this influence? I mean, he's supposedly so influential that he can go ahead and control the judge, control everyone in the courtroom. But, I mean, aside from a few scenes at the beginning of the trial, it never really feels like he really has that political backing and political control that he's supposed to have. I mean, they told us he has all these connections. They never really come up. They always tell that, oh, the police office is working against you. I mean, it never really feels like it. You get into every single crime scene. Yeah, I know that Gumshoe is letting you in because he likes Edgeworth and wants you to represent him, but still you never really have anyone else, any other cop interfering with your work. Nothing like that ever happens. You don't really get thrown in jail for trying to interfere with an investigation. Again, nothing of the sort ever happens. Maya gets thrown in jail and gets released a lot, like immediately afterwards as well. Like, if Von Karma really wanted to hurt you and had all that political control, he could literally just lock Maya for longer. He never really feels like he has all that control that he's built up having. So it really feels weird, because again they set you up for a really uphill battle, and the battle doesn't feel uphill in the slightest. It feels actually pretty smooth compared to literally every single other prosecutor. I think he does a worse job than every single other prosecutor, and is supposed to be the best out of all of them. So again, they built him up and they to be this big thing, and he absolutely did not live up to the expectations in the slightest. And then the other issue is obviously the fact that they tell us that he plays dirty, far dirtier than Edgeworth did. The thing is though, I don't remember him playing dirty. I mean, he plays dirty by beating the main character and hiding evidence. That's the most he does. He doesn't present false evidence though, I don't think. And if he did, it was like really minor. I don't remember. There was no big evidence that was presented that was false. Like, if he was really that dirty, he would have been flooding the entire court record with false information. I don't remember seeing any of it. We don't really catch him with false evidence. He only really has, like, steal some evidence. That's the most we see. Again, Edgeworth was worse in the second episode. He literally presented false evidence related to the time of death to basically make sure that, Maya killing Mia was a possibility. We don't really get any of that. We don't really get any, dirty work by Von Karma. Again, he doesn't use his political power to interfere with Phoenix's investigation. He doesn't throw Maya in jail for longer after she spoke out she was held in contempt of court. He could have manipulated things to keep her there for longer and affect Phoenix mentally. He doesn't really hire any, policeman to prevent Phoenix from investigating anything. He doesn't really hire policemen to harass Phoenix. None of them really happens. He doesn't fake evidence. Again, there's no fake evidence. I think that's a massive mistake. Once again, you built this character up to be something, and it doesn't live up to that something. I really wish we like the first day of the trial was really about Von Karma doing every single dirty trick in the book, just throwing false evidence upon false evidence, and you have so much false evidence that it looks impossible to beat, but you have to kind of find a contradiction between the information here and there. You will have to build a way to kind of contradict something. Like, it tried to go so hard to get the perfect victory, so hard. It creates so much false evidence that evidence would end up contradicting itself at some point, and you'd have to find that contradiction and then build your case from there. And then once Von Karma is kind of caught with false evidence, a little bit of his aura of invincibility inside the court of controlling the judge kind of backs off a little bit. The judge is a little bit less willing to go along with Von Karma after he gets caught with false evidence, and then from that you could actually build that up to something that happened in the past. In this case, that it was another thing, and this was a build-up, by the way, for the eventual reveal that Von Karma is actually the one behind everything. This would be the point where the judge would kind of reprehend Von Karma for doing what he did, and kind of telling him, "I remember what you did 10 years ago. I mean, are we going to do the same thing again of presenting faulty evidence to the trial?" We kind of overhear like him being reprehended or something, and this is kind of what builds up our interest in Von Karma's past later to be a little bit more organic than what really happened, because our heavy interest in Von Karma always felt manufactured, because yeah, I mean, the reason why I even started investigating Von Karma in the first place is because conveniently the insane guy leaves a letter inside of a very obvious safe after he literally heard us talking with the parrot to tell us the safe number, and he just leaves it there for us to get it. And inside is obviously the letter of Von Karma telling him specifically what to do. Why is that letter not burned or thrown into the ocean or something? Why did he keep it in the safe? What was he planning to do with it? Just burn it? And again, it conveniently leaves again. The crazy guy, whenever we go to his house, hears us listening to the parrot telling us the combination for the safe, and it doesn't occur to him that he should just, I don't know, remove whatever letter he has inside the safe to just not implicate Von Karma. Like, are we serious right now? Not only Von Karma, but himself as well, because that thing was basically describing the entire murder. So he's also only implicating himself, and I don't buy the excuse that he kind of didn't get anymore. I'll get to that later, but that just felt like a weak excuse. So, us even starting to investigate Von Karma at all always felt really ham-fisted. It doesn't come naturally through the progression of the story. It just comes out of nowhere. It feels really forced. So again, the judge talking a little bit about, the one incident where he presented faulty evidence. And is this gonna happen again after the first day where we find out the fact, manage to prove that Von Karma is using false evidence? This would be a very interesting way of actually setting up the investigation into Von Karma's past in a more organic way. Speaking of the crazy old man, well, this is the second issue. As I talked about before, I just don't buy the excuse that, the old man just didn't care about anything and just, I did my crime, I'm fine now, I don't care about it anymore. The motivation doesn't make any sense, even for some insane dude. I don't think they built it up well in the slightest. I mean, I don't even remember it very well, what he decided to say in that context. In that context, I think he said that I'm now at peace because he killed his defendant or something. I mean, his defendant, his attorney. I mean, I think he was pissed off that he had to, that nobody believed in his innocence, and that he was forced to act like a lunatic for 20 years to get out of the crime. It was basically what his attorney told him to do to escape the crime. He was pissed off because nobody believed in him, which again kind of goes once again to support, Phoenix's morality, because he would have been able to not only prevent this guy from ruining his own life, but also catch the real killer during that assassination of Edgeworth's father. But overall, again, what did he even gain from kill? I don't even remember exactly, but honestly, I remember it being very weak. It was a very weak explanation as to why I don't care anymore, I admit to the crime. Now, first of all, I just don't find it fun to have the villain just admit that they did something. I don't find it fun, it's not. This game is about really hammering in the fucking criminal. So one of them just admitting to the crime is just fucking terrible, honestly. And then he also goes around and tells you that he wasn't really involved uh, in the murder of the other of in the past. Again, it doesn't feel like we earned that revelation that he was not the killer in the past. We don't really earn that revelation. It just comes out of nowhere because the guy actually, you find out he's not insane and just gives up. I think it would have been a lot more interesting if instead of just giving up and admitting to the entire thing, um, the crazy old man instead just, yeah, you got me, I am not insane, but I still didn't do it, and then you have to go ahead and slowly but surely still fight him with contradictions, find contradictions in his dialogue, in his statements, and then finally smash him with with the final touch. I still feel like, yeah, him not caring as much, him being one of those characters that doesn't care as much about being found guilty, is fine, but I still don't think he should have just given up. Nobody would really just give up and go to jail for this. So, I mean, he'll probably be at peace with his decision. He doesn't really care. It's not really about, being found guilty or not. It's just nobody wants to be found guilty. I mean, and it will be no different, but I feel like it would still be more interesting for the trial if instead of just admitting to the guilt, it just made the life hard, and you had to work very hard to finally be able to get him. And then yes, at the end that he did kill them. In fact, I think that would be a lot more fun. Absolutely. Especially because you spend so much time trying to get this old man. You start in episode 2 going around with this old man. He just doesn't go anywhere because he's still feigning to be a crazy old man. Then in episode 3, you finally, he runs away in episode 3. And you finally clock in that he's actually not insane, that he was hiding a lot of stuff all this time. And I feel like that's a really interesting way to create a character, an opposition character for you, someone who you thought was insane. Is actually not was hiding behind his insanity. Was actually completely sane. I think you can just completely switch their personality mid-trial would be really interesting to see, honestly, and a lot more satisfying because again, you spend 2 episodes running around circles around this guy, after this guy, and he just goes ahead and just admits to everything. You don't really get a satisfying ending for it. All this investment you get into this guy is just thrown into the trash, honestly. I don't like it. Then yeah, after the guy admits, again, the reason why they did it this way was because they were not able to manage the pace of this episode. This is probably the second biggest issue, besides Von Karma's character not being the most well written. There's going to be more problems with Von Karma later. The second biggest issue was obviously the pacing, because, I mean, in episode 1, the things advance, yes. Then in episode 2, nothing advances. The entire story just halts to a halt. There's not really any new discoveries. There's very minor discoveries, in fact. The plot doesn't advance. I feel like they artificially stopped everything from happening. And that then obviously they had to resolve 2 problems in the final episode. They had to resolve the whole crazy old man plotline, and they also had to solve the killing of Edgeworth's father. They had to solve both on the final episode. And obviously, one of them ended up being both ended up being compromised, but one was compromised a lot worse, a lot more than the other, and there was obviously the old man plotline. The second one was also compromised because that entire thing required, honestly, it deserved the full investigation and the full trial. It never got one. It got like 2/3 of a trial, but the old man one was a joke. It just got him to admit his guilt to really just move on and get to the final thing, which again, they didn't even need to do that. They could have done all of a setup case. I mean, they could either do it more normally by organizing it a little bit better. So you have the first day, then you deal with the old man in the second day, and then you deal with the stuff in the past in the third day. Or what I actually think they should have done is you basically do more or less the same thing in the third day. In the third day, you still fight with the old man, but you basically have a full trial with the old man, trying to nail down his crime. Again, this part it wouldn't be a very long trial because it's not the end of the episode yet. You'd have one more day afterwards. Not of this trial though. It'll be another trial. So it wouldn't be long, but you would basically be twice, at least twice as long as what we got from the crazy old man. You finally nail him down, and then the story still goes on, and Edgeworth still goes in and tells us that he was not guilty of this crime, yes, but he was guilty of something else, because that's what basically what happened in the story. But instead of it happening mid-trial, and in the middle of the trial, you end up starting, a trial for two different crimes, because you end up trying to, pin Von Karma to the current crime, and then you also start arguing about the crime in the past, which is not what's being argued in here at all. It just comes out of nowhere. Instead of that, you finish this trial. Edgeworth still goes up to the stand and admits to his guilt in the murder of his father, because yeah, he didn't really know exactly what happened because he passed out and he actually shot the pistol once. He didn't really believe he shot the pistol, but he may have been the one who did it because there was no. He was, I mean, logically, he was one of the people who could have done it. He may have shot the shot wrong. He doesn't really remember it very well, but he has nightmares from it, so he kind of is in this. He kind of obviously his own, trauma from it is also helping, but yeah, helping him question things. Von Karma also probably nudging him in that direction was also helping too. But yeah, Edgeworth still goes ahead and, admits to the judge that he killed his father. And then there, he would have had another day and another trial. Edgeworth once again being the defendant. And Phoenix obviously also defending him again. And this time, he would have been for the murder of his father. By the way, another thing that we would have to change, a small detail, is that, yeah, I know that the statute of limitations for the murder of his father was ending in the third day of the trial. And instead, what we need to do is basically push that day off one day, and instead it will end in the following day, not in that one. So yeah, so now we have another day 4, which is pretty interesting. Again, I think it's fine because the investigations for this crime in particular would be smaller, especially the third day would be a lot shorter because you don't have the investigation for the crime of the past. That all of that would be moved over. You would have one thing that you would have though, yes, would be some sprinkling of guilt here and there. I think you could still maybe find the letter that the old man decided to, but rather than it being you opening the safe with the parrot, instead what should have happened is you talk with the old man and the old man tells you to go ahead and investigate the safe. It just gives you the code, and yeah, that's how you, because you start investigating stuff that the old man tells you to do that, and that's how you get access to the letter. That way it feels more natural rather than the parrot just telling you. Like, that just feels, it just doesn't feel nice. Yeah, the old man, after being sent to prison, just tells you to go to his safe. I don't know, somehow, because yes, you could have actually built an interesting relationship here where a lot of the old man's fantasies were actually kind of true in a way as well. Stuff about his son could kind of humanize the character a little bit. And yeah, he ends up helping Phoenix because of that relationship. Or fake relationship, in a way, that reminds him of something else. But yeah. Like Phoenix would be more or less the age that his son would have been, or something like that at this point. But yeah, you get the picture. Now, with a character-driven moment like this, it actually feels like you earn the right to go to the safe and get the letter that has Von Karma's writing. Not by getting the parrot to tell you. That just feels very, I don't know, man. It just doesn't feel nice. Then, this entire fourth investigation would be about fully investigating the crime of the past, which means you have more time to build stuff up. By the way, you could also sprinkle a little bit more of Von Karma's stuff. Again, that idea with the judge reminding you of that false evidence, or the faulty evidence, would be a good way of setting up. Would be a good way of setting up a little bit of doubt over Von Karma organically. So you could sprinkle some more moments like that, but you're doubting Von Karma and stuff. And then, yes, you'll be investigating the crime in the past. By the way, this crime is also related to the LC incident, the one that Mia and Maya's mother were involved in. This was actually the old incident. It was in this one that the police asked asked their mother to go ahead and use the spirit channeling technique to see which person was the responsible for killing Edgeworth's father. Basically, Edgeworth's father and the security guard got stuck inside of an elevator doing an earthquake inside of the courtroom. That's why Edgeworth still has nightmares with. He's still scared of earthquakes, by the way. So yeah, they were actually inside, below the rubble, and they were actually about to run out of air, which basically meant the three of them ended up falling unconscious during this entire thing. You know, Edgeworth's father and the security guard end up getting into an altercation with each other. Edgeworth, trying to protect his father, actually ends up picking up the pistol that the security guard drops, shoots out a shot, gives out a shot at random, and ends up falling unconscious due to lack of air. He doesn't remember anything else afterwards. That's why him not remembering makes him feel like he was the one who could have, you know, shot and killed his father, because he doesn't really remember what he hit or where he shot it. But yeah, whenever they discover the police, they discover Edgeworth unconscious as a kid, security guard unconscious on the ground, and Edgeworth's father shot and killed. One shot only. But yeah, and they asked Maya's mother to go ahead and use their spirit channeling technique to find out who the killer was, because they were not really able to get to the answer. Which, again, by the way, this whole DL6 incident doesn't make any sense. I think that's a plot hole. Because honestly, what they told us was that, you know, that in the DL6 incident, Maya's mother chose the wrong person, incriminated the wrong person. Basically, and technically, she did incriminate the wrong person, but that was not the verdict that the judge reached. Like, they didn't really get not guilty because this is the wrong person. No, what they reached was that the client is not sane to be charged. So how exactly does that mean that she was wrong? They never really got to the conclusion that Maya's mother was wrong. But again, what they told us was specifically Maya's mother got the wrong client with her spirit channeling stuff, and that ended up leaking to Wright. And, you know, the police, everyone ended up, you know, thinking spirit channeling was a sham, and the police then screwed over the whole thing and dumped the entire guilt on her. They were very ashamed and blah 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 blah. But again, this whole thing doesn't make any sense, because again, it's not like it was proven in court that she was wrong. The person she told the police was guilty, they weren't. No, that's not what was proven. What was proven was that the person was insane. He could have committed, he could not have committed it, but they were insane, so they could not be judged. Again, how does this mean that they were not the ones guilty? How does this mean that spirit channeling doesn't work? How does this mean that he was the wrong person? It doesn't mean he was the wrong person in the slightest. So unless I'm missing something, this is completely idiotic. I think I don't even think there was a need to make the connection between the DL6 case and this. Personally, I feel like they could have used it for something else. I don't know why they used it here. If they would try, if they had, like, again, it just doesn't match the reality, man. It should have been something else. Personally, I mean, I know that, you know, what they ended up doing with it is kind of interesting, because yes, Maya's mother ended up talking with Edgeworth's father's spirit and asks him who killed him. And Edgeworth's father tells him he was the insane old man, tells her he was the insane old man. But the reason why Edgeworth's father told her that was because Edgeworth's father collapsed to the ground, and when he collapsed to the ground, the only people inside of the lift of the elevator were his son and the security guard, and the security guard also had a pistol. So he assumed that the only person able to kill him was the security guard. He was wrong though, because yes, Von Karma was also in the building, not inside the elevator. He was also in the building though. In fact, Von Karma was actually going against Edgeworth's father in a trial, and Von Karma ended up finding the collapsed elevator, opened the door, and saw the three of them unconscious. He just picked up the gun and shot Edgeworth's father. By the way, Edgeworth's shot actually hit something. It hit Von Karma's shoulder. But yeah, I mean, there was no way for Edgeworth's father to even know that it was Von Karma, so he just pointed to the person he assumed, which once again is a very convenient way of doing things, because again, Edgeworth's father could have just told her that he wasn't completely sure about who killed him. He can just assume that it was him, but I'm not entirely sure it was. But no, he just told her that it was. Again, I feel like the whole connection with the L6 case is really weak. Everything about it was kind of clever a little bit. The more I think about it, the less I like it. I feel like it should have been used for something else, because this is a problem for other games. I feel like Maya's and Mia's mother was not used nearly enough for how much she was built up, and I really feel like this DL6 case should have been something that happened later, where Maya's mother actually pointed to the real person, like the person was correct, but the system was corrupt, and they ended up using false evidence to elevate him of the crime. So he ends up being found as not guilty, when in reality he actually is guilty of the crime. Maybe it's actually White himself who was the person responsible. Maybe, maybe someone tied to White or something. I feel like, once again, this is another mistake. So yeah, overall, saving the DL6 case for the future White case that I already mentioned, that should have happened later, was a better idea. I don't think the DL6 connection with this case makes any sense, personally. But yeah, finally, as we're getting really long into this one, because I just feel like there's so many missed opportunities here. Yeah, the investigation. I feel like, yeah, investigating for this case should have happened. We should have had a full day of investigation. We go around, yes, we still have Von Karma going around stealing the files in the police. This happens in the fourth investigation instead of the third. We would go around and also investigate Edgeworth's childhood home eventually, when you end up learning that this is another thing important, is that that he's basically an evil guy. All he cares about is his own perfect score and getting basically every single trial go his way. That's all he cares about. But personally, I feel like they could have given him a much better motivation for killing Edgeworth's father, and they don't even need to change a lot of it to make it more organic. Again, it just feels like a complete overreaction from him. Like, he really just feels like a complete overreaction, because what happened was Edgeworth's father was in a case as an attorney. He was like one of the best defense attorneys, and he was in a case against Von Karma. Von Karma won the case. He won that case, but Edgeworth's father managed to prove that Von Karma used faulty evidence in the trial. So basically, that little blemish that Von Karma had in his resume was precisely because of of Edgeworth's father. So then, yes, he got the opportunity to kill the guy that basically ruined this perfect record, so he just took it. I just don't feel like that's reason enough for him to hate Edgeworth's father that much. It really doesn't feel like it's coherent or organic. It just feels, it honestly feels like anime-like overreaction, to be honest. From someone like Von Karma, it feels completely. I know the chance just fell down in his lap. I just feel like it's an overreaction, and there's a way to do this much more organically. Let's say that everything is still the same. Instead of it just being the end of the trial, though, the trial did not end. Von Karma did not win the trial. He was actually in the second day, and it was the second day of the trial, and they were preparing for the third. They were getting out, going to go home, and then the next day would be the final day of the trial. In the second day of the trial, Edgeworth's father managed to prove that Von Karma was actually using faulty evidence, just like we do in, just like we learn in our own story. However, again, the trial was not over. Von Karma had not won the trial. Instead, as they're going out, Von Karma, Edgeworth's father, is talking with someone, and Von Karma overhears the conversation. And from what he hears, he is screwed, because for the third day of the trial, Edgeworth's father has irrefutable evidence, not only of Von Karma's involvement in whatever crime happened, but also that the person he is defending is actually innocent. Not only would he, expose corruption from Von Karma, but he would also prove, he had definitive proof that would basically just end the entire trial. And he had that proof. Um, so yeah, now hearing this, he immediately starts shaking. Now this is a real reason to murder. Not only forget about this perfect record. He's going to lose his perfect record. He's going to get a loss. He's also going to get charged with corruption, because there's going to be clear corruption being exposed here. So his career is basically finished. Now you have a real reason for Von Karma to really want to kill him, because not killing him would basically just ruin his career. Now killing him actually offers him a benefit, besides just being absolutely petty revenge. That feels like a complete overreaction. Now there's a reason to kill him. There's a benefit, a material benefit here. He kills him to prevent himself from losing the trial the next day and from being exposed for corruption. So yeah, the next day, because the defense attorney is killed, Von Karma wins the trial. Because there's no more defense attorney, he managed to turn the entire thing around. He still maintains the faulty evidence claim, but he ends up being able to turn the trial around regardless. Now his motive for murder is a lot more organic, in my opinion. It makes a lot more sense. Another thing is that this could be tied directly to him adopting Edgeworth, which once again is another thing that just happened, but we never really got an explanation as to why it happened, how it happened. And Edgeworth was adopted, sure, but why was he adopted? Why did Mr. Von Karma adopt Edgeworth? We never really got an explanation for that. In fact, it makes no sense why he adopted Edgeworth and made him a prosecutor at all. If he wanted to just, if he hated Edgeworth and wanted to see him fail miserably, there was no need to make him a prosecutor and basically help him rise all the way to the top just to break him down. I think there was a lot of ways he could have ruined Edgeworth as a way to relieve his stress caused by Edgeworth's father. It doesn't make any sense now. If Edgeworth's father had irrefutable proof that, in that case, from all those years ago, the person he was defending was innocent, the culprit was someone else, and that Von Karma was corruptly involved in the entire thing, that changes things, because Edgeworth's father had that evidence somewhere. And well, obviously Von Karma, after he kills Edgeworth's father, goes through his suitcase trying to find that evidence, but he finds nothing. So now he's in a little bit of a problem, because that evidence still exists out there, and if someone gets their hands on that evidence, then he's screwed. So what he does is he basically gets Edgeworth as his adopted son, and he tries to investigate his house, his childhood house, from top to bottom, trying to find where the evidence that Edgeworth's father had is located. And he finds nothing, unfortunately for him. He looks at every nook and cranny, doesn't find the evidence. So yeah, then eventually he ends up, well, I guess the guy was just bluffing, but, well, better safe than sorry. He basically buys the house and makes sure that nobody else ever enters the place ever again. So the house nowadays is in kind of disarray, kind of destroyed. Nobody else has touched the house in years. So yeah, now you have a reason as to why he adopted Edgeworth. I'm gonna get to the relationship with Edgeworth later, which is also something we did not explore well in the slightest. But yeah, then in the investigation, we as Phoenix actually go to Edgeworth's childhood home and actually end up finding the evidence that he had. It would not be complete though. There would be some parts missing, either some of them burnt or ruined or ripped off or something. But we would find some parts of his involvement, at the very least. Maybe not the corruption part, but the ones related to, you know, the fact that he was defending the wrong person or something. I don't know. Some part of that would be there. The rest would be destroyed. Maybe by water or something, by a leaky pipe. And we will actually get access to that because Edgeworth will actually mention some special place from his childhood home that he remembers more or less. And yes, we would end up going that it would be a secret place that obviously Von Karma would not know. And we ended up finding a bit of the evidence there, but you could just make up any reason as to why a lot of it would be destroyed, and you just get a little bit of that evidence back. But yeah, a lot more interesting as well. And then finally, the relationship between Edgeworth and Von Karma. I don't think he was well explored in the slightest. They feel more like strangers throughout the entire thing than adoptive father and, you know, foster child. We don't really see any connection. I mean, especially from Edgeworth's side, Edgeworth doesn't really have any reason to hate his father, his foster father. He was the guy who adopted him when his father died, and basically helped him live a very good life, helped him reach the prosecutor position as well. He was the one who taught him everything he knows about being a prosecutor. His entire ideology is based off of Von Karma. We never really get any sort of emotional connection between the two of them. We never really get any sort of emotional anguish by Edgeworth. I mean, because first of all, yes, Edgeworth believes that he's just doing what he does. Even if I'm his foster son, he's going to go hard against him because he believes in justice or whatever. And then him slowly but surely realize that actually he doesn't really believe in justice, but he's actually just corrupt himself, and actually he's the one who wanted to kill me. He's the one who actually tried to frame me for this crime, and then actually he's the one who killed my father in the first place. We never really get through those stages of him, you know, respecting his father and, you know, his foster father, and, you know, seeing him as someone worthy of respect, that even if he's prosecuting him, that's what he should be doing anyway. To, you know, someone who's, what are we doing here? Why are we going around? Well, we're actually going around finding and using false evidence, just like he does, faulty evidence, like Edgeworth did. But even if he understands it, him going through it with his own foster father using it against him, it feels pretty weird being on the opposite side of that, to the point where Von Karma is involved in this. Why exactly would he want? Why exactly is he involved in this? Why does he want to frame me? Is the question. And then finally realize that Von Karma is actually the one who killed my father. All this emotional roller coaster doesn't happen. Edgeworth doesn't feel like he's connected to Von Karma in the slightest. They feel like strangers. They don't interact with each other. There's nothing like we could have had a scene of Von Karma getting out of the detention room. We actually meet Von Karma on the way out, and that's when basically Edgeworth tells us that his doubts start exacerbating. All of a sudden he's talking about how he's actually the one who killed his father, because it was Von Karma who planted those seeds in there. under the guise of actually, wanting to see how his son was doing. But he was basically just, he goes ahead and tells him that he's just doing his job. It's all about justice. He believes that he is innocent, but actually putting those seeds of doubt inside of Edgeworth about the crime from the past. So yeah, I feel like we really should have gotten a lot more connection. We should have gotten more exposition as to how Von Karma raised Edgeworth and stuff. Again, then from Von Karma's side, it's a bit interesting. I don't know what I would do differently here. You could go two ways, obviously. You could either make him care more about Edgeworth or not, or explain why he doesn't care. I do kind of wish a little that he had developed a little bit of an appreciation. And also, this would also be interesting to set up his daughter in the next game, that maybe Edgeworth actually embodied the child that he actually wanted, and that his daughter, that would actually set up his daughter perfectly for the next game, and the inferiority complex that she had, because yes, Von Karma actually despised Edgeworth, because Edgeworth's face was Edgeworth's father was the only one who ruined his perfect shriek and was about to convict him of murder, to convict him of corruption. But at the same time, he had a love-hate relationship with Edgeworth, because he actually was the child he always wanted. He was the prodigy that he always wanted. He was the one who should have been his son, not his daughter. And his daughter noticed that, obviously. She noticed that even throughout all that, Von Karma actually respected Edgeworth and respected his intelligence and actually saw him as someone with an intelligence worthy of the position. You would see that he actually would have helped him in a lot of situations to get ahead, because he actually respected Edgeworth and actually would have liked for Edgeworth to be his real son. Unfortunately, this relationship was fated to never work and to end in disaster, because obviously the starting scenario was never good. It was always based around, material gain from the beginning, from Von Karma. So this was a relationship between foster father and child that was always doomed to end in tragedy. And that's how it happened. I feel like that would have made a lot more interesting for both characters. Again, I'm really hammering in on character writing here, because I feel like they left it on the wayside for a lot of this stuff. And then finally, another aspect that I really wish was explored a bit more is, why Von Karma decided to frame Edgeworth. Again, from all his actions, raising him all throughout his life, making him the top prosecutor, the top genius prosecutor, helping him throughout all of this. Why did he decide now to frame Edgeworth? I don't even remember the reason why he did it, honestly. Which is especially interesting because, again, had he waited one more day, he would have been completely elevated from that crime, but he decides just to do it anyway. Why not just make his plan afterwards, after the statute of limitations ends? There's no reason why he couldn't have done that after the statute of limitations. Why now, first of all? And why does he do it in the first place? The game never explains it to us, and I think this one is very important. The why. We never get the why Von Karma does any of the stuff that he does in the present, because we end up getting stuck in proving what happened on the past and his motivations for what he did in the past and whatnot. We never get the explanation as for why he did what he did in the present. We never get an explanation for that, and once again, that just makes his actions feel nonsensical, because why would he do it? They should have given us a reason for that. I don't know what. They should have given us a reason. So yeah, overall, as I said, I really like the ideas in this chapter. However, I don't think they were explored or implemented to their full potential. I feel like this chapter could have been really, really, really good. I mean, it could have been literally a 10 out of 10 episode, for sure. Unfortunately, with the execution we got, the most I can give it is a 8 out of 10. Which is still good, but man, it could have been so much better. honestly. Really disappointing in some ways that he never ended up living it to its full potential. Then moving on to episode 5, the final episode, and also the shortest episode in this analysis. By the way, I guess it's overdue for a short analysis this time around. I'm not going to go over the entire case again, I'm going to keep it short. But yeah, the final episode does, overall, end the story pretty well. Overall, I'd say this episode does end the game fairly decently. As for the plot, it basically involves a few new characters. Maya leaves, so we don't really have Maya with us, so we get a new character to act as our assistant, and that assistant is Lana Skye, who actually ends up appearing in other games. I'm pretty sure that this game was retroactively added later this episode. I don't think it was in the original. It was added later on because there's obviously a lot of mechanics that don't exist in the second or third games. The investigation sections don't exist at all. Not to mention that the length of this episode is obviously not comparable to the length of any of the others. Like, this episode alone is probably long enough to be comparable to the second game. Like, maybe a little bit less than the second game. Like, the fourth episode in the second game is pretty long. But I'd say at the very least the first 3 chapters, plus a good chunk of the fourth, is how long episode 5 is alone by itself. It's a very long episode. It's just, episode 5 is probably half of the first game in terms of length. And overall, it's a pretty good episode. It's pretty tough. There's some tough ones. There's some tough not investigations, I'd say, but some tough reasonings to do during the trial. But damn, it is satisfying. It is really satisfying to finally nail the villain in this one. Overall, again, yeah, going back a little bit, yes, we meet Lana Skye, who acts as our assistant while Maya is absent, and in this episode we need to basically prove that her sister is not responsible for a murder that happened, and there's a lot of stuff that goes on, a lot of stuff that throws the investigation completely open, and yeah, in the end it's proven that, you know, the villain was actually the one who killed this person, and then also the one who killed someone else in the past was the chief of the police, and we end up nailing him in the end. And it's a very nice way that you end up nailing him. Like, the whole plan by Phoenix is genius. Like, it's really smart what he does. He basically ends up completely locking the chief of the police into the verdict itself. He ends up locking the chief of the police completely into that verdict. And he's very smart in the end. Basically, the whole stuff was that the chief was actually claiming that Lana was the one who killed that guy in the past, and that the chief just went ahead, cut a little bit of a piece of the guy's jacket, and hid it for himself in order to go ahead and have something on Lana Skye's sister to basically keep her obedient, because if she didn't get obedient, she would basically release that piece of evidence, which would basically get her sister in jail, because that piece of evidence had basically Lana's fingerprints all over it. And then, when you actually look at the picture, though, the piece that he took from the jacket was actually not bloody. When you look at the body, when he died, he was fully blooded from everywhere in front of him, which means that by the time the chief took the piece of the jacket from the guy had not blooded himself yet, because again, he had this chest full of blood, and the piece did not have any blood on it, so the guy took the piece before the guy that was killed died, which basically just completely nailed and sealed the coffin, because by that point it was impossible for Lena to have done it, since again there was no blood yet. The chief had to cut it before the guy died, and because there was nobody else inside that room, and the chief himself admitted it, he was the only one there besides Lena and the other guy that was unconscious. He was the only one who could. He set a very nice trap for the police chief, and he fell for it hook, line, and sinker. Yeah, that was the only way you could really beat the police chief, because he had so many advantages. Like this is what actually Von Karma should have been like, but wasn't. Like the police chief obviously is built up as someone who has a lot of exemptions, a lot of protections from the law, and he makes full use of it to very unfair levels. Like, a lot of times you feel like you got him, but he just squirms his way out. And then you feel like you got him again, and then he just comes back, and he squirms his way out again. It's always really hard to nail him, but the way he does it is really satisfying in both ways, because first of all, it's really smart what Phoenix does. Like, it's a really good trap. Honestly, I think most people would have fallen for that. Like, it's a really smart trap. And the other one is, it actually feels good to take down the chief, because he actually feels as powerful as the game makes us believe he is. And by powerful, I mean powerful within the system, controlling the system and stuff. Like, it's really satisfying in both ways. The chief himself is also very well built up. He's slowly built up as a character, as a threat. From the first day of the trial all the way until the end, you slowly build this threat more and more and more. He's always kind of there, but it's always slowly building up, unlike Van Karma from the previous episode, where the opposite happened. He's always there, yes, but never as a threat. You only really start seeing him as a threat from episode 3 onwards. Whereas in episode 5, they actually managed to make him a threat from the beginning, and you actually get hints about his involvement from the beginning as well. Von Karma, you don't. You only really get anything on Von Karma from episode 3. You know that he's corrupt, but that doesn't really matter to the case. You only really start seeing connections to Von Karma in episode 3, which again, I think was a massive mistake from that. We should have started getting hints a lot earlier, as I already talked about. I'm not going to go back to episode 4, don't worry. But here, you actually get those hints early. The build-up is done early and continuously, and the climax is good and feels earned. So overall, the entire episode is very good. There's really not much I can really say negative about this episode. I think it's a very well constructed episode. The only problems I have with this episode are actually meta problems for the rest of the story. Actually, I have a few problems, but let me get to this first. The first main issue is that the stakes on this episode are so high, with someone who is so powerful, that it really feels like you can't really build anything higher than that for the following games. And lo and behold, you actually don't. You go to the next episode and your next game, and you're basically dealing with minor criminals again, after you basically dealt with one of the biggest figures in political life in this game. Like, it really feels like a massive drop in stakes for the next game. It just doesn't feel like these trials that we're going through just feel like filler after we just dealt with the police chief in the previous one. Like, the stakes never recover. You never get a trial as big as this one ever. Even the Von Karma, even the White and the Von Karma trials, they both just feel like the stakes are. You just don't get any more trials that one up the stakes in this game. All of them end up going lower in terms of stakes, which is an issue. Again, whenever you're writing a story or a trilogy, you need to slowly build up the stakes, slowly but surely. Yes, there can be times where the stakes are lower, yes, but there needs to be a trend of going upwards in stakes. We don't see that. You see the stakes going all the way up, shooting to the sky in the first game, and they just drop off a cliff afterwards and they never get back up again, which is a problem. Another thing is, Phoenix feels really competent in this trial. Like, really competent. First of all, he doesn't have Maya with him. He gets another assistant, but yeah, sure. The thing is, he doesn't have Mia. That's the main problem. He does not have Mia with him. And the thing is, the game, throughout the trilogy, builds up the narrative that Phoenix actually is still lacking in a lot of aspects, and that Mia kind of saves his ass here and there, and that's actually true as well. With Mia only really basically telling you that Phoenix has, reached their level or even surpassed her at the end of the final trial of the final game, of the third game. Before that, you never really get told by the narrative that Phoenix has surpassed Mia, which in and of itself is kind of weird. I mean, in the first game, Mia is never really built up as this, extremely competent superwoman of a defense attorney. They kind of do that in the final games, but yeah, regardless, you never really get that told to you that you surpassed Mia until the final game. You still see Phoenix making dumb mistakes, dumb decisions, dumb comments all throughout the next games. Again, it makes sense because this game is also a bit of a gag game, but it really feels like a regression when it comes to Phoenix's skills as an attorney, because like there's no way the Phoenix from game 2 would have been able to pull off what Phoenix from this episode 5 does to the chief. Like there's no way. Like, come on, man. He really just feels like he regresses in terms of skills, personally. So that's another thing that makes the whole plotline going forward weird. As for actual technical details in the story itself, there's actually two problems I have with this case. The first one is the fact that there's a very striking similarity between the whole plotline of Lana and Edgeworth. Both of them have that old stuff about them not really remembering what happened in the past very well, and both of them having nightmares about what happened in the past, and both of them deep down fearing that they may have been the ones who killed that person, only to, in the end, both of them to be wrong, and it was actually someone else who was taking advantage of their ideas that they actually did it. And it was not actually them, so they actually just recycled the entire plotline. It's basically the exact same thing, just in different contexts, which I feel like is kind of after you literally exactly the episode afterwards. It's the exact same thing in two subsequent episodes. I feel like it wouldn't have been as bad if this episode happened later, but again, given the timeline and where the characters are, it's impossible for this to happen later. It has to happen here before Edgeworth leaves, and before Maya comes back. It has to happen right here. So you can even move it later either. So yeah, moving it later would have been good for the stakes question that I mentioned before, and for Phoenix being too competent, and then for the, to kind of wash a little bit of that similarity between episode 4 and 5. I mean, as it is, you're just basically playing with a very similar plotline back to back. Even though, I mean, the plots are not similar in the slightest. This one is way more complex and intricate, but this is a main part of the plotline, which is all it also was in the Von Karma one in episode 4. So that's a little bit reusing the same thing. And the second thing that bothered me was the fact that there was one specific piece of evidence. That was the phone call between Lana and her sister that was built up as being something very important, something crucial. In fact, you spend a lot of time, Phoenix himself, wondering what that call was about. That may have been a massive clue and whatever. And that phone call is actually never used. We never get told what happened in the phone call. It never comes into play for anything. At least I don't remember it. And it pissed me off because it was built up as something so important and it was never bothered. They never bothered to actually explain what happened. Not even, at the very least, to kind of quell the doubts. No, they just forget about it, I think. I don't remember seeing it. But yeah, besides that, I mean, that's about it. The only criticisms I had. I already told that this episode is very long. I don't think the pace suffers for it. I think they manage the pace well. It's just that it's very long. There's a lot of content to be explored. But I don't think the pace is slow, personally. I mean, being 4 times longer than episode 3 or something, I never felt as bored as I did in some parts of episode 3 during this episode 5. Plus, by the episode 5 I was already also playing the game for longer, which meant that I could have more accumulated fatigue of the game. But no, I felt more bored than episode 3 that happened earlier. And it was still only the third episode I was playing than in episode 5. So yeah, I don't think the pace is an issue, even with it being very long. It's just a long investment. It's a big investment of time, but I think it's worth it. So yeah, overall, I give it a 9 out of 10 for this episode. Final thoughts to end up this review. To round out this review, I'm gonna give my overall thoughts. Overall, I think it's a competent visual novel. I mean, you can clearly tell that the narrative, there's not really a coherent thread. There is somewhat of a thread here, more or less. Episode 3 is a filler. A really big filler, by the way, which is what is one of the biggest fillers I've seen. Like, literally longer than episode 4. That was actually important to the plot. Maybe it wasn't longer, but at the very least the same size. So, I mean, but yeah, overall, this gets worse in subsequent entries. I feel like in this one, I think he's more or less okay. I think he's more or less okay. Um, um, but yeah, another thing I want to say is that this game was more focused on making it fun and engaging doing the trials than really just, focusing hard on the narrative, on the character writing, and it shows at times. Again, the fillers are very obvious, where there's literally no character writing, character development, nothing. It's just a completely random case that the main character gets dragged into. By the way, episode 5, I actually forgot to mention that another weak spot of episode 5 was there wasn't a lot of character writing in it. You had Edgeworth, who was dealing with the fallout of him being accused of the false evidence and stuff and being a fake and all of that, which was very good actually. That was very interesting. But Phoenix also felt kind of disconnected from the case. There was no personal ties of Phoenix to the case. They should have, I don't know, made something up relating to his, I don't know, college years, maybe meeting Lana's sister or something. I don't know. Some connection here to make him more involved. I feel like for such a big episode to not have the main character emotionally involved in any way, shape or form kind of hurts it a little bit. But yeah, this is a problem that happens throughout a lot of it. Like episode 3, the main character doesn't have any personal involvement. Episode 5, he doesn't have any personal involvement. So again, you don't really get the main character evolving at all in those 2 episodes. The main character doesn't need to be personally connected either. He can evolve even without being personally connected, but I don't think he does. There's no change with the main character or anything really. So the main character kind of feels like dissociated from the plot. He's there, but he's also not there. I guess he's there doing his job, which for a narrative is always kind of iffy, in my opinion. And this gets way worse in later games, way worse. But yeah, overall, I think it still does a competent job at telling us a story. Yeah, episode 3 is a problem for me, but yeah, I still think it does a competent job of telling us a story. You get an evolution, particularly with Edgeworth, who slowly evolves into a character. You slowly get more context into the main character himself, who doesn't really need to evolve or to change, but getting more context into his actions is all you really need, at the very least earlier on. And I think they do this fairly decently at building up what the main character is, what he's about, what his ideology is, why it came to be. And they also did a decent job at making him likable. They did. There are some annoying characters for sure. Old Wag being one of them. I am not a fan of Old Wag. The devs obviously were, but I am not a fan of Old Wag. I do like Larry, I do like Edgeworth, I do like Maya. I like Mia, but I feel like in well, we'll get to Mia later when we get to her. But yeah, overall, they did a decent build-up of their characters. I feel like they did a good job. Overall, though, I do think, yeah, there's pacing issues in a lot of the episodes. The filler, I mean, episode 3 really feels like filler. I mean, I'm calling it filler. I know it's not filler, but it feels like filler. And some of the chapters, I know that they're for tutorials, but what can I say? They're still supposedly an episode. Especially the second one feels really weak, personally, because it also still feels like an extended tutorial, kind of. Feels really weak. A lot of missed opportunities. A lot of missed opportunities. Overall, the overall narrative is not exactly very strong either. There's not an overarching narrative being told here. We're not really building to anything. There's individual narratives each episode, but not an overarching one. So overall, I mean, I really cannot give it the highest ranking possible for a visual novel. I don't think the gameplay saves it either. A visual novel has to have a really strong story for me. Yes, it also has to be fun, and yes, it was fun, but it can be fun, and also good. Again, just in episode 4, there were so many changes that could have made the episode better without it stopping to be fun. So, yeah, in terms of rating, I mean, I'd give this game, this visual novel, Ace Attorney 1, a 7.5 out of 10. And this is going to be the highest rating I'm going to give to any of the visual novels, by the way. I think this is actually the best one. I think it kind of goes downhill from here, which is interesting. I don't think Capcom ever managed to make a better Ace Attorney game than the first one, which is actually very much a shame, at least from the 3 I played. But from what I see online, I really don't think there's any. From the discussion online, I don't think there's going to be any Ace Attorney game that is better than this one, which is really interesting. I mean, usually you think they would build up on the foundation and make it better. Not really. I'm afraid. I'm afraid they let go of the narrative and focus more on the entertainment aspect, and that really screws the entire thing up. But yeah, it's a 7.5 out of 10 for me. That's it for this review. Finally finished and posted. I guess I don't know how long this took. But yeah, be on the lookout for the next one. Will probably come out sometime this year, maybe. But yeah, if you like the review, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, hit the bell. If you have any comments, if you disagree with me with anything, first of all, you're wrong. Second of all, leave your comment down below. I'll make sure to read it. And yeah, that's about it. Thank you for watching, and see you on the next one. I am out.